today is going to be Sylvia Lovely. Sylvia introduces herself as a CEO by experience, a lawyer by training, and a media mogul in her dreams. She can now add foodie to that resume. Sylvia is co-owner of Azure Restaurant and Lounge, patio, as well as Azure Catering and Brazabana Restaurant. For those of you who like Cuban food, you got to give Brazabana a try. It's excellent. She co-hosts the Food, News, and Choose show on KET television, along with Chef Jeremy Asby, who is the executive chef for the Azure Food Group. She is writer and speaker about food issues and finds special joy in connecting communities with the economics of the food industry. And I think that's one reason why we invited her for this particular speech. Sylvia believes in the power of food as well as the humor in delivering a serious message. So now for the truly lovely, literally, Sylvia Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Lower. Can y'all hear me? I'm a loudmouth, so I probably will get too loud. But thank you very much, Larry, and thank you for inviting me here today. Actually, I get to be a chef at Larry's invitation. I'm going to be in the Taste of Jessamine County, and I have here some chips and salsa from Brazabana. You may not know quite the difference in, say, Mexican food and Cuban food, but we do plantain chips and not corn chips. So Teresa, and I want to introduce Teresa again. She is a producer of KET show, Food, News, and Choose. Why don't you hand those over to the young people and let them, youth before beauty or something like that. I don't know. If I'd known there were going to be so many young people here, I would have touched up my roots or something, Hey, I thought I'd start out. One of the things that I don't do is eat before I speak, so I didn't go through the line. It looks delicious, so you'll have to treat me at some point in the future. But I always think of that story of a college president who wrote his memoir, and in one of his stories, he told of going around to all the small towns in the Midwest that he was speaking to people. And he was taken to the inn one night by his handler and left there, and he went into his room. But before he left, the innkeeper said, would you like to eat before you speak? Oh, no, he said, I never eat before I speak. And when the handler brought him back, he went into his room. He was very tired, but the walls were paper thin. He could hear him talking. And she said, well, how'd he do? And he said, well, he sure should have ate. So that's my ultimate excuse. If I don't make you happy here today, then I sure should have ate. But I am glad to be here today, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my background, but Larry said that very, very well. You may have noticed my apron, okay? Let me step out here and say that I'm not Betty Crocker. So deal with it. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm a foodie, but I don't know a rutabaga from a Winnebago. Jeremy Ashby feeds me every night. Why heat up the oven when who's been to Azure in here, okay? Who's been to Brasa? Oh, good, okay, so you'll have to come back. But let me tell you a little bit about me later when I get into the meat of what I want to talk with you about today. But here today, I do want to introduce with my sign. Oh, I don't have a sign. We ended up without a sign today, so I can't tell you a lot about my KET television show. And we had the times that it was going to be on, and perhaps we can find a method to get those out. But and that's not Teresa's fault, by the way. It just happened that way. Some things happen. But it showed you the show times. We're on KET, and the really exciting thing that I have to tell you about is that we have some great sponsors, and Alltech is among those. And y'all are familiar with that great company that's right here in Jessamine County. So Alltech and our show in April, starting on Sunday night, is about the algae plant. If you're ever traveling out I-64, there on the left is the big algae plant. And that show is about that. So we'll get those dates out to you. I think Sunday is the first date, Teresa, that it's on at 6:30 or something. Anyway, we'll get that out. But also, I want to mention our other sponsors, Critchfield Meats, Sullivan University Culinary School, and Seaworth Superstore, which is a restaurant equipment store. So we're very much supported. We're real excited about having an educational program about food. What I want to talk to you about here today, so I thought I would begin with why I'm here. And I thought perhaps maybe an hour-long lecture on food policy in Southern Australia or something. What do you think? Teresa just said, kill me now. No, I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to have some fun here today. I am, after all, though, a policy wonk. And on our show, I kind of play the foil to Jeremy being very serious about food, and I'm kind of have some fun. I've reached the age where I can poke fun at someone kind of half my age and have a big time with it. I'm going to begin with a quiz because I want to know who's in the room. I want to know your foodie quotient, okay? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'm looking for if there are any yes answers in the audience. I know, put yourself in that role, I know what Lazy Housewives and Little Britches are. No, they're not Kardashian reality TV show characters, okay? Anybody know? Any yes answers? They are heirloom green bean varieties. Norma, I bet you knew. Norma Taylor with Edible Magazine, by the way. It's a great magazine if you haven't seen it. Okay, you get a second chance. When you're served squash soup in an upscale restaurant, do you immediately inquire as to where that squash was grown? Okay, that's okay if you do, but do you go a step further and ask for the GPS coordinates so you can turn it into NASA so you can find out exactly where it was grown and how grown? I don't see any yeses, do you? Do you know people like that, though? I do. I have a son in Duluth, Minnesota that's like that. He interrogates the waitstaff every time. But then here's a kid who likes Duluth, Minnesota. I often say I took the wrong baby home from the hospital. I mean, it's like typically 20 below there. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with that kid. But anyway, I have one last question. And you get an opportunity to say yes. Do you like to eat? Let me hear it. Raise your hands. This great food these folks prepared. We're so happy. Okay, so you're all foodies. And I suspect you may be foodies about like me. You like to eat, right? You like the food. You're not really obsessed with a lot of things. I mean, you might care about where the food comes from, but it's not an obsession that you have. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about the local food movement and how it intertwines with economic development. And people sit there, scratch their heads. What? They look at me like I have two heads. But I want to convince you, I won't have enough time. Teresa's keeping time on me, and I'll speed up. I know you'll leave at 1 o'clock if God were speaking here, okay? So I'm going to make sure you get out of here. But let me again reiterate why I got into my food business. I co-own the restaurants, Azure Restaurant and Patio, and we just started Brasabana, started on January 2nd, and probably the worst winter we've had in a long, long time. We're crazy to be in the restaurant business, but we're going well. Also have the KET show. You can go to foodnewsandchews.com, actually see a show, and click on that. Teresa does a great job keeping up with that. And I write and I speak about food policy, including I have a Dear Foodie column where I get to poke a little bit of fun at people like my son who, are like just almost too obsessed with food. And then my other thing that I love that is so fun is I'm in the food consulting business, and I get to talk to people, local leaders, about how to engage in the economic development aspects of local food. But I want to begin just to tell you a little bit about the local food movement and exactly what that is when we talk about it. I like to get people off the idea that it's about mileage. Is it 50 miles, something had to be grown or produced or raised within 50 miles? Is it, Kentucky Proud has a lot of different definitions, if you've heard of the statewide program that brings local Kentucky food. So there's a lot of different definitions. But I'm going to ask you something because I'm going to challenge you that it's really something very different. I'm sure you have farmers markets, right? At least one. Do you have multiple farmers markets? Most even small communities are starting to develop a lot of them. Shopping centers will have them and all of that. Why do you think people go to farmers markets? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Sounds like a pretty easy question. Anybody want to say? To buy food, you think? Go ahead.
Better deal.
To get a better deal, buy food. All those are good reasons, but you know that research shows us that people actually go to farmers markets more for forming community and actually reaching their neighbors and being able to see people. And we can wonder what that's all about. But it's something about reaching across those tomatoes and those cucumbers and that guy in the overalls standing there and you can shake his hand. He has got dirt in his fingernails. There's something about that, right? Would everybody agree? There's something that kind of reaches you about that. So why is forming community and knowing people so important? And how do you connect that to the local food movement? And this, folks, is where you can make some lemonade out of lemons. And by the way, that lemonade was really good. Haven't had it for a while. Who in here has seen the movie Nebraska? It's a great movie. Nobody? Okay. It's about this 80-year-old fella who is convinced that he's won the sweepstakes, $1 million. He's got one of those letters. How many have gotten one of those letters? I did. How many of you went to someone and had them read it for you just to be sure you didn't win? I did. And I'm a lawyer, and I'm like, hey, it sounds like I won. Anyway, he's trying to get to Lincoln, Nebraska, because he thinks he's won $1 million, right? So he gets all the way there, his son takes him a trillion miles, and he walks in the office, and of course, it's not a big deal to say that he didn't win the lottery. He didn't win the $1 million. On the way out, the woman who's working in the office looks at the son who just traveled with him all these ways, and she says, did he really believe that he won $1 million? And his son replied, well, he tends to believe things people tell him. To which she replied, that's too bad. Is that a reflection on our world today? So, I think what we're looking at here with this need for community is a lack of trust, too much information, and our insatiable appetite to get more and more of it. We're looking for something, aren't we, that we can trust, something we can feel good about and touch, thus local, thus authentic, thus food. Because guess what? Food is the one thing we all do, right? When we go to funerals, we eat afterwards. And this has gone on since the beginning of time. We celebrate over food. In fact, sometimes we combine the two, as I did with my father. He died at 10 o'clock a year and a half ago on a Saturday morning in Louisville, and that night we had a Hudipole party. Hudipole, he loved Hudipole, at Azure. So we celebrated that life over food. So, that, in fact, is one of the reasons Bernie and I got into the business of food. We got in it to make money. Ha, ha, ha. We got in it for the short hours. Ha, ha, ha. No, I often tell people that we didn't get in it. We actually got in quite by accident 11 years ago because we saw people celebrating over food, and it appealed to us. I say it was his midlife crisis and better than a woman half my age, but then I point out that it could be more expensive. That's true. So what does this have to do with you as local leaders? I'm trying to keep my eye on the time. I found a great quote by Thomas Edison, and here it is. We often miss opportunity because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work. Is that good or what? So let me count the ways the local food movement is working in your favor, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. One is health and wellness. Many communities are doing Biggest Loser contests. Obesity is a huge issue. Further and further into this, we're finding out that there is linkage between, say, cancer and what you eat, what goes into your body. People are increasingly interested. How about food safety? The local food movement is about finding safe food. If you know that farmer, at least if the food is tainted, you know where to go and that you can get some justice, right? You can go right out to the farmhouse. But you know, the whole Chinese thing, I was reading the other day, soy sauce made of human hair, ick. You know, some really icky stuff, tainted meat and cantaloupes, and that's just in the U.S. That's happening out there. So people are hearing that. Remember, we're hearing so much information, some of it conflicting. One day salt is good for you, the next day it's not. Red meat, sometimes it's good for you and sometimes it's not. How about access and affordability? Many people can't afford the kind of food that they really would like to eat. And so there's a lot of community work being done in that regard. And then finally, environmental stewardship, where 40% of our food is wasted in this country. Those are important initiatives. And I'm going to add another one that's often overlooked, but growing in interest, is its potential as an economic development opportunity, and that's up to you as local leaders. And that's called, anybody here against creating jobs? I think we all want to create jobs, and we want to create quality jobs. And tourism is really growing in importance. So I often call this presentation Seize the Movement. And I did this in Seattle for the National League of Cities, talked to a lot of local officials. How can you seize the movement of your community? How can you create jobs and tourism opportunities? And I would tell you, just as a beginning point, to just look around. As that commercial for the credit card says, what's in your wallet? That's what local communities do best. I'm speaking in May to a group called the Mid-America Economic Development Council about this very thing. I'm excited because the audience is made up of largely small town and regional economic development officials. I think it's really prescient on the part of this organization to do really this very new presentation on the food movement and how people can take advantage of that to create a purely local economic development stream. That actually, folks, when you come right down to it, is the stock and trade, isn't it, of local communities, is examining your assets, looking what you have. And I know some of your economic development officials, I know that's what they do. So, beyond your wallet, how do you think beyond the farmer's market or the food truck? What are some of the advantages? We're not talking Toyota here, we're not talking 3,000 jobs. What we're talking about, though, is something like that's happening in Detroit. It's a small strand, but it is a strand where abandoned properties are being turned into community gardens and they're creating food systems in Detroit. It's not huge, it doesn't create tons of jobs, but it does create economic growth. This is something where you can be in on the ground floor. It's taking off across the country, and I'm seeing it every day as I work within my own business. You can capture a movement where people are actually paying attention. And it's good politics, folks. People are really happy when they're well fed. So what do you do to get started? One, I would say you assess your local situation. And that's moving beyond a glance into your wallet. These studies and assessments can be quite sophisticated. It's called, you can look to your economic development professionals to start engaging in the process of a serious look at the way at your assets and how you can move forward. Some of the questions that need to be asked. Fundamentally, what are you? What are you good at? I would dare say not pineapples, right? All right. How about bourbon? Everybody wants bourbon these days, don't they? Particularly after last night. I'm surprised they have all the inventory they have left over. So what do you, I've heard cattle. I've heard cattle about this region. Lots of strength in that area. What could you do with that? The tourism industry. How about your independent restaurant association? It's a growing thing, and lots of them are opening up, lots of them are closing down. You know, they say 60% of small, independently owned restaurants close within the first year of opening. We got very, it was a lot of luck because we don't have a lot of training and we don't have a lot of esprit de corps, where people are working together to make something happen. And yet, we're moving into an era of not only ecotourism, but food tourism. Baby boomers are looking for small, quaint places. And don't leave out your chains in places like this. I know the management here is looking into the food movement and how they can, we've had some wonderful conversations out here with some really neat stuff that's happening. In fact, I would say the fast food industry and Walmart and some of those folks are really out front on this and really taking it very seriously. If you watch ads where Walmart truck is going across and then local foods are listed at the bottom as important. So you need to reach out to those kinds of folks. You create the stories that can just dazzle people. I've been working with a city called Jeffersontown. You may know it's on the edge of Louisville. They love this because they're creating a small town atmosphere on the edge of a big city. Drives Louisville nuts because, you know, they get the advantage of the airport and all that kind of stuff. But J-Town is working on its downtown and its independent restaurants. You can organize your farmers markets, and a lot of communities are starting to do that as we move into the more mature stage. Our farmers are bewildered. They're asked to go in many different directions, and I know that Jeremy, for instance, says that, you know, farmers will typically back the pickup truck back to the restaurant kitchen in the summer, and they have loads and loads of sweet corn or loads and loads of tomatoes. How do you market those? How do you organize those? Have you done a market study? Do you know what your consumer interest is? And there's a growing interest. We used to think the food movement was just, you know, high-end, affluent people over wine pairings in nice restaurants. That's not true anymore. More and more people are gaining a toehold in this. And how about a hub? What is a hub, you might say? It's a growing phenomenon across the country. It's where you organize, as Teresa does well, herding cats. You try to get your producers. You don't need every farmer doing strawberries. You don't need every farmer doing one thing. But you've got to organize that, and that's what a hub is all about because it's kind of the central force. Then you've got to grow your consumer markets. You've got to work with your institutional buyers and all kinds of people out there who can do that. And how about culinary education? We're working right now on a project where we're trying to get folks to understand the importance of training culinary workers. It's a growing field. We may quibble over the jobs, but there are a lot of folks that want these jobs, and they're important jobs, and it is important that someone out there knows the difference between a rutabaga and a Winnebago. It's real important. A good tomato and a bad tomato. And finally, you could get research into state policies. You can find the money. There's money and grants out there for matching. There's entrepreneurs who are interested in the food market. And so finally, after an assessment, you can do a doable plan of action, as they are doing in Greenville, South Carolina. These can range anywhere from your own kind of desires to build something, all the way up to hiring people who do this on a regular basis with the algorithms and all the stuff and statistical measures. And they've done that in places like Louisville and Lexington. But again, it's starting to spread to smaller places. Places like Moscow, Idaho, where I did some work on community development. And now they've been working, they wanted to do a hub, the thing I described. Chris Mannheim, who is a colleague in the consulting business, went in and said, no, you're not ready. It really is a challenge to bring your producers together with your consumers, and it will require some attention and folks paying attention. Louisville and Lexington, and you may say, oh, those are bigger places, but again, I think one of the interesting things to watch is in Eastern Kentucky with the Governor's SOAR initiative, and Appalachia Proud, as they're trying to organize a rural area to become more involved and create jobs and places for folks to buy local food. So I would conclude, and I think I'm doing well on time, to my fellow foodies, that's what you are, stand proud, and to borrow from yet another commercial, it's time to think outside the bun. So thank you very much. That's Taco Bell, I think. Any questions? Yes? It is where the old Friends and Company location on Lane Allen, 841 Lane Allen, right by Turfland Mall. And oh gosh, we're having fun with that. And there's a real hunger for Cuban food, it turns out. A large growing population that I didn't know about. Frankly, it's surprising pleasantly.
I'm always looking.
Awesome! You need to come.
You know it's good if a Cuban eats at your Cuban restaurant.
Yeah, I'm loving that. Anything else? Any other questions? All right, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Okay, they can still hear me. Again, we'd like to thank Sam's Club for sponsoring today. Thank you for allowing us to bring our youth leadership class in to join you all today. Thelma, the food, always delicious. She fixes me for my special needs, so I appreciate that as well. Final thing is a free lunch. If you put a business card in here, you have a chance to, a free lunch with the chamber. Not a free lunch anywhere, a chamber lunch.
All right, this one.
Donna McKinney with Town and Country Bank. All right. Again, thank you guys. As always, we appreciate you all joining us for our monthly luncheon.